Hi, if you've ever considered building an app, I'd like to tell you how you can validate your product idea in just a couple of weeks instead of months. The secret is a concept known as prototyping. You see, when building an app, there's a lot that goes into it. There's a user interface for all the screens, the database, the login and authentication, administration, integrations with email, notifications, etc. The list goes on. But with prototyping, you're only building the minimal feature set needed to demonstrate your app to your intended audience. That means you can activate the customer feedback loop, and this is a key concept for prototyping, by the way, much earlier in the product cycle. Much more on this in just a second, but first let's take an example. Let's say you have a killer idea to display Zillow in the online real estate market. If you decide to build your app idea, you would need to create the user interface, so basically all of the screens in the app. You would need to set up a database with all the listings you're going to promote within the app. Those listings have to come from somewhere, so you're likely setting up a server that integrates with the listing services or MLSs and populates your database with all the properties you want to showcase. Incidentally, you're probably also signing listing service agreements with each local market, or finding real estate partners in those markets. Lots of work that doesn't even pertain to the app development. You're setting up an admin system to be able to add and remove users, or maybe to moderate content, for example if you allow visitors to comment on listings. You're allowing users to authenticate and log in, manage their profile, or manage their preferences. You're probably also creating advanced filters and searches, for example if someone is looking for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house under $40,000 in a neighborhood with a private pool and gym. The list goes on and on. Before going through all that, wouldn't it be nice to know that your idea has legs? That's where prototypes come in. You can hedge your bets by building a prototype. With a prototype, you're only building the public-facing user interface because you're building just enough to showcase how the product is supposed to work. Typically, this results in about 10% of the effort, meaning a 6-month project to build out the entire app could be done in a little over 2 weeks with a prototype. So circling back on something I mentioned earlier, the customer feedback loop. When you build an app, the customer feedback loop is critical. It's a signal that tells you whether you hit the mark or you have more work to do. The customer feedback loop is essentially the way your audience responds to your app. Do they like it? Would they use it? How often would they use it? Do they think your pricing or monetization model is fair? Waiting 6 months of spending tens of thousands of dollars to find out if your product is a success is a huge gamble. With a prototype, you can start the customer feedback loop in 2 weeks, meaning you can validate the idea before spending lots of time and money, or you can pivot your idea to address any concerns your audience may have. So if this all sounds good, what are the drawbacks? Well, there aren't really any except for the fact that a prototype is not a fully functional app. However, it's great for demonstrating features. For example, if you want to demonstrate your app to a small group of VIPs. And don't forget, it's not just customers. It could be investors, it could be friends and family who might help you fund your app idea, whoever. And best of all, the effort to build a prototype is work you'd have to do anyway when you build the final app. That's because you're building out a lot of the user interface when you build a prototype. Once you get validation from your customers or investors, you can continue building out the rest of the app, things like the admin system, the database, integrations with the listing services to pull properties, all of that. In fact, if you've ever heard of options trading, prototypes are essentially the same idea. Instead of buying a security, you can purchase the option to buy that security at a predetermined price. That way, if your investment doesn't go as expected, you're only out the cost of the option to buy that security, which is usually a fraction of the cost of the actual security. It's the same concept here. Instead of building out the full app, you can build out enough to validate the app via the customer feedback loop, and then decide whether to proceed with the full app or pivot based on the feedback, all before spending lots of money. I'm Dustin DeVries, one of the co-founders of Caffeine Interactive, where we build apps and share our best practices with people like you. If this sounds interesting to you, click the subscribe button below and follow us as we share tips on how to bring your app ideas to life.